Thaddeus Dixon. That is the name, and this is the setback. First, a rookie cornerback gets hit before his real chance. Then, the Giants' depth chart gets squeezed. And then, the one that changes everything. This tells us how fragile the entire secondary build really is. By the end, you will know exactly why this matters. Big Blue lock-in. Breaking news from the facility. Undrafted rookie cornerback Thaddeus Dixon reportedly suffered a torn Achilles during workouts. And I know what some casual fans are already saying. He was undrafted. Why does this matter? That is exactly the wrong reaction. Real talk before we dive in. Eagles fans, Cowboys fans, and Commanders fans love pretending Big Blue depth does not matter. They want Giants fans quiet. Not here. This channel is by Big Blue, for Big Blue. If you want Giants daily louder than rival noise, subscribe right now. Comment, "Let's go Giants," and plant the flag. Now let's get to the real story, because this is not just about one rookie. This is about competition. This is about opportunity. This is about how the G-men build a secondary when the offseason refuses to cooperate. Here is the part that hits hardest. Thaddeus Dixon reportedly suffered a torn Achilles during workouts before he even got a real chance to compete for a roster spot with the New York Giants. That is the cruelest timing possible for an undrafted rookie. Not after a full camp. Not after a preseason push. Before the battle really started. Dixon was not a household name yet, and that matters. Because undrafted rookies do not enter the building with guaranteed patience. They do not get handed comfort. They walk into a room where every rep is a job interview, every drill is evidence, and every mistake gets compared against someone else fighting for the same lane. That is why this injury lands differently. For a drafted player, a team often has investment already attached. For an undrafted cornerback, the pathway is narrower. You have to prove you belong fast. You have to earn coaches' trust fast. You have to show special teams value, defensive growth, and daily reliability before the room gets smaller. Dixon's reported Achilles tear interrupts that process before it can breathe. And for the Giants, this becomes more than sympathy. It becomes evaluation pressure. The front office and coaching staff were going to use workouts, camp, and competition to sort the back end of the defensive backfield. Every young corner matters in that environment, because the team is not just filling names on a board. It is testing who can survive the standard. Now that test changes. The truth nobody's telling you. Injuries to undrafted players matter because they remove competition from the room. That is the difference between watching any channel and watching this one. Big Blue Nation understands this. The Giants are not built by stars alone. They are built by the last corner who survives a roster squeeze, the young defender who earns trust, and the depth piece who becomes necessary when the season gets physical. Personal opinion here. I think this is a real loss for the competition. Even if Dixon was not guaranteed a roster spot. Not because we knew he would make the team, but because the Giants needed every cornerback body pushing the room. Disagree? Drop your reasoning below. And that brings us to the second layer. Because the first story is the injury. The second story is what it does to the cornerback room. And this is where the depth conversation gets uncomfortable. Now, what most channels miss is this. The Giants did not just lose a name from the bottom of the roster conversation. They lost a live competitor in the defensive backfield before that competition fully formed. That changes the mood of the room. Cornerback depth is not a luxury position. It is survival. Every team wants enough bodies to get through workouts, camp battles, preseason evaluations, and the constant churn of roster decisions. When a young corner goes down early, the staff loses a data point. They lose reps. They lose a comparison. They lose one more player, forcing everyone else to sharpen up. That is why Dixon's injury matters. The Giants were going to use this stretch to learn who can handle the details, who can line up clean, who can compete, who can stay available, who can handle the demands of a secondary that is still being built. And let's be honest, availability is part of the evaluation. It is not fair, but the NFL is not built around fair. It is built around who can stay on the field long enough to prove they belong. Dixon reportedly suffered a torn Achilles during workouts. And that kind of injury immediately turns a football conversation into a human one. You feel for the player first. A rookie walks into an NFL building chasing a roster spot, and before he gets that real opening, the whole path gets harder. But after the human side, the football side comes fast. The Giants still have to build the room. The staff still has to sort competition. The front office still has to watch the depth chart. The defense still needs enough corners to function through the grind. That is why this is not just an undrafted rookie. That phrase is lazy. It ignores how NFL rosters are actually formed. New York Tough is not a slogan here. It is the job description. I'll say it, and I know some of you will push back. In my opinion, this is the kind of setback that exposes whether a front office actually has a depth plan. If one undrafted rookie injury makes the room feel thin, that is not on the player. That is on roster construction. Tell me I'm wrong. Now I want your take. Comment depth if you think the Giants need another cornerback added. Comment trust if you believe the current room should handle it. No middle ground. Quick reminder, if you are still here, you are Big Blue. Hit subscribe, because story 3 is the one that matters most. What is coming next is the bomb. Because Dixon's injury is not only about Dixon, it is a warning about the entire offseason. The roster is never as stable as it looks. Now, this is what you really came for. The story that flips the whole conversation is not just the reported torn Achilles. It is what the injury reveals about the Giants' secondary build. Before Thaddeus Dixon even got a real chance to compete for a roster spot, his rookie year took a devastating turn. That sentence is bigger than one player. It shows the harsh reality of roster building. Plans look clean on paper, then workouts start, and suddenly the board changes. That is the NFL. No sympathy from the schedule. No pause button for development. No guarantee that every young player gets a clean runway. And for the Giants, this matters because the defensive backfield competition was supposed to create answers, not assumptions. Answers. Who fits? Who rises? Who handles pressure? Who gives the staff a reason to keep him? Dixon was part of that process. As an undrafted rookie cornerback, he was fighting from the outside of the roster picture. But that is exactly why his presence mattered. Players fighting from the outside often raise the temperature. They force veterans and other young corners to compete harder. They give coaches more combinations to test. They create surprise paths. Now one of those paths is damaged. And let's connect everything. News 1 told us the individual cost. Dixon reportedly suffered a torn Achilles before his real roster chance. News 2 told us the depth cost. The Giants lose one competitor from a cornerback room that needs evaluation. News 3 tells us the organizational cost. The secondary build is now under a brighter light. That is the bomb. Because every Giants fan knows how fast the conversation changes at cornerback. One injury, one missed evaluation, one player failing to separate, and suddenly the front office has to rethink the back end of the roster. The Giants are building around competition. That is the only way this works. You cannot just pencil in depth. You have to discover it. You have to stress it. You have to see who survives. Dixon's setback removes one chance to discover something. And that hurts. This is also where Big Blue has to be smarter than the rivals. Eagles fans will laugh because the name is not famous. Cowboys fans will talk loud because that is what they do. Commanders fans will pretend they are above it until their own depth gets tested. But Giants fans should understand the truth. The bottom of the roster becomes the top of the conversation the second injuries hit. That is why off-season volatility matters. A torn Achilles during workouts is not just a medical note. It is a roster reminder. The team is still fragile in places. The secondary is still being shaped. The competition is still alive, but now it has one less participant. And for Dixon, the human side remains front and center. This was supposed to be the beginning of his NFL push. An undrafted rookie does not need the path to get harder. It is already hard enough. But the league does not wait. The Giants have to keep moving. The coaches have to keep evaluating. The front office has to keep watching the cornerback depth. And every remaining player in that room just got a louder message. Availability and performance both matter. Film don't lie. The Giants needed competition, and this injury removes a piece of that competition before the real sorting begins. That is chess, not checkers. I'm going on record right now. In my opinion, this is the most important kind of small news fans ignore. Not because Dixon was guaranteed a role, but because these are the exact moments that reveal whether a roster is truly prepared. If Big Blue lacks depth later, people will remember the big injuries. I will remember this warning sign. Convince me I'm wrong. Now you have your answer to the question I asked earlier. Comment depth or trust below. If this analysis hit, like the video. That is how we keep the algorithm pushing real Giants breakdowns, not lazy headline noise. 3 stories. 1 picture. Thaddeus Dixon's reported torn Achilles is the headline, but the meaning is deeper. The Giants lost a young cornerback competitor before the full roster battle took shape. That squeezes the defensive backfield evaluation, tests the depth plan, and reminds Big Blue that offseason stability is never guaranteed. This is why I refuse to treat undrafted rookies like disposable names. The G-men need competition everywhere. They need pressure in every room. They need enough young players pushing from the bottom, so the final roster is earned, not assumed. That is how New York tough teams are built. And yes, this connects to the bigger Giants picture around Jaxson Dart too. When your starting quarterback is leading the offense, the defense cannot be held together with hope. The secondary has to be real. The depth has to be real. The roster has to absorb bad breaks. Listen closely. The next video is going to break down what the Giants should do with the cornerback room after this setback. If you are Big Blue for real, you need that one. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and make sure YouTube actually sends it to you. Drop your final answer below. Depth or trust? Because here is the cliffhanger. One decision is still hanging over this roster conversation. How aggressively the Giants respond when depth gets hit before the season even starts. Do they trust the room? Do they keep evaluating internally? Do they search for another competitor? That answer is coming. And outside this building, the Eagles, Cowboys, and Commanders are watching the same thing every team watches: weakness. If the Giants look thin, rivals will test it. If the Giants look prepared, rivals will feel it. That is the line. Big Blue, this is not the loudest story of the offseason, but it is one of the clearest. Thaddeus Dixon's setback matters because every roster spot matters. Every competition matters. Every corner in that room matters until the Giants prove the secondary is built to last. Subscribe, stay locked, and drop your final answer below. Let's go Giants. We ride together.